Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear friends. It's me, Micheal Bond. You definitely recognise me as a video creator. Welcome to my channel, and thank you for joining me on this brand new video of book reading series. It's also known as Read Aloud Stories. I am so glad you're here to join me for story time. I hope you will find it well fascinating and find it entertaining. First of all, I show a book I've got since I have read a first 8 Paddington book series. Therefore, I have got Micheal Bond, Paddington. It was illustrated by R.W Alley. This is a really fascinating book, so detailed. I like this illustrated book cover. Ladies and gentlemen, would you care to join me for story time? Excellent. You finally came to the right place. So, shall I begin the story? Mr. and Mrs. Brown first met Paddington on the railway platform. In fact, that was how he came to have such an unusual name for the bear, because Paddington was a name of a station. The Browns were waiting to meet their daughter Judy, when Mr. Brown noticed something small and furry near the left luggage office. It looks like a bear, he said. A bear, repeated Mrs. Brown. On Paddington Station? Don't be silly, Henry. That can't be. But Mrs. Brown was right. It was sitting on the old leather suitcase marked "Wanted on Foliage," and as they drew near it, stood up, politely raised his hat. "Good afternoon," he said. "May I help you?" "It's very kind of you, Mr. Brown, but as a matter of fact, they were wondering if we can help you." "You're a very small bear," said Mr. Brown. "Where are you from?" The bear looked around carefully before replying. "Darkest Peru. I'm not really supposed to be here at all. I'm a stowaway." "You don't mean to say you have came all the way from South America on your own?" exclaimed Mrs. Brown. "Whatever did you do for food?" Unlocking the suitcase, the bear took out an almost empty glass jar. "I ate marmalade," he said. "Bears like marmalade." Mrs. Brown looked at the label around the bear's neck. He said, quite simply, "Please look after this bear, thank you." "Oh, Henry," she cried, "we can't leave him here all by himself. There's no knowing what might happen to him. Can he come home and stay with us?" "Stay with us?" repeated Mr. Brown nervously. He looked down at the bear. Would you like that?" he asked. "That is," he added hastily, "if you have nothing else planned." "Oh, yes," replied the bear. "Oh, would like that very much. I have nowhere to go, and everyone seemed in such a hurry." "That settles it," said Mrs. Brown. "Now you must be thirsty after your journey. Mr. Brown can get you some tea while I go and meet our daughter Judy." "But Mary," said Mr. Brown, "we don't even know his name." Mrs. Brown thought for a moment. "I know," she said. "We'll call him Paddington after the station." "Paddington?" said the bear. Tested it several times to make sure. "It sounds very important." Mr. Brown tried it out next. "Follow me, Paddington," he said. "I'll take you to the snack bar." Mr. Brown was as good as his word. Paddington had never seen so many snacks on one tray, and he didn't know which to try first. He was so hungry and thirsty he climbed up on a table to get a better look. Mr. Brown turned away, pretending he had tea with a bear on Paddington Station every day of his life. "Henry," cried Mrs. Brown, "when she arrived with Judy, "What are you doing to that poor bear?" Paddington jumped up to raise his hand, and in his haste he trod on a strawberry tart, skidded on a cream, and fell over backwards into his cup of tea. "I think we'd better go before anything else happens," said Mr. Brown. Judy took a hold of Paddington's paw. "Come along," she said. We'll take you home, and you can meet Mrs. Bird and my brother Jonathan." Mr. Brown led away to the waiting taxi. "Number 32 Windsor Gardens, please," he said. The driver stared at Paddington. "Bears is extra," he growled. "Sticky bears is twice as much, and make sure none of it comes off on my interior. It was clean when I set out this morning." The sun was shining as they drove out of the station, and there were cars and big red buses everywhere. Paddington waved to some people waiting at the bus stop, and several of them waved back. It was all very friendly. Paddington tapped a taxi driver on his shoulder. It should be a bit like Douglas Parade," he announced. The man jumped at a voice of sound of Paddington's voice. "Cream?" he said bitterly. "Cream and jam all over me coat." He slid the little window behind him shut. "Oh, dear Henry," murmured Mrs. Blunt, "I wonder if we're doing a right thing." Fortunately, before anyone had time to answer, they arrived at Windsor Gardens, and Judy helped Paddington onto the pavement. "And now you're going to meet Mrs. Bird," she said. "She looks after us. She's a bit fierce at times, but she doesn't really mean it. I'm sure will like her." Paddington felt his knees began to wobble. "I'm sure I shall, if you say so," he replied. "The thing is, will she like me?" "Goodness gracious!" exclaimed Mrs. Bird. "What have you got there?" "It's not what?" said Judy. "It's a bear called Paddington, and he's coming to stay with us." "A bear," said Mrs. Brown, and Paddington raised his hat. "Well, he has good manners. I'll say that for him." "I'm afraid I stepped on a jam tart by mistake," said Paddington. "I can see that," said Mrs. Bird. "You had better have a bath before you're very much older. Judy can turn it on for him. I dare say you'll be wanting some marmalade too. I think she likes you," whispered Judy. Paddington had never been in the bath before, and while the water was running, he made himself at home. First of all, he tried writing his new name in a steam on a mirror. Then he used Mr. Brown's shaving foam to draw a map of Peru on the floor. It wasn't until the drip landed on his head that he remembered what he was supposed to be doing. He discovered that getting into the bath is the one thing, but it's quite another matter getting out again, especially when it's full of soapy water. Paddington tried crying out, "Help!" at first in a quiet voice, so as not to disturb anyone, then very loudly, "Help! Help!" When that didn't work, he began bowling the water out with his hat. But the hat had several holes in it. His map of Peru soon turned into a sea of foam. Suddenly, Jonathan and Judy burst into the bathroom and lifted the dripping Paddington onto the floor. Thank goodness you're all right, cried Judy. We heard you calling out. Fancy making us such a mess, said Jonathan admirably. You should have pulled the plug out. Oh, said Paddington, I have never thought of that. When Paddington came downstairs, he looked so clean and no one could possibly be cross with him. His fur was all soft and silky, his nose gleamed, and his paws had lost all trace of the jam and cream. The Browns made room for him in a small armchair, and Mrs. Bird brought him a pot of tea and a plate of hot buttered toast and marmalade. Now, said Mrs. Brown, you must tell us all about yourself. I'm sure you must have had lots of adventures. I have, said Paddington earnestly. Things are always happening to me. I'm that sort of a bear. He settled back in the armchair. I was brought up by my Aunt Lucy in the darkest Peru. He began, but she had to go into the home for the retired bears in Lama. He closed his eyes thoughtfully, and the hush fell over the room as everyone waited expectantly. After a while, when nothing happened, they began to get restless. Mr. Brown tried coughing, and then he reached across and poked Paddington. Well, a lever, he said. I do believe he's fast asleep. After all that's happened to him, said Mrs. Brown. Is it any wonder? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to conclude this story off, fabulous and amazing, modern classic British children's story called Paddington by Micheal Bond. This story seems obviously fascinating to the new generations of children and families. As many of you have seen, Paddington has been adapted into the film since 2014, when the first film came out back in November 2014. It's such a great movie, and also you have the first two sequels as well. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know in the comments down below if you enjoyed this video. I'd really appreciate it. So, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon, and thank you so much for stopping by.